When our values are crossed, we know it. We feel like crap, like it doesn't feel good. In fact, the true test of a value when I'm doing this with someone is to imagine the opposite archetype. And I watch people who locked in on it correctly and their face gets so, Gene, like let's just say yours is about generosity and giving, and that we determine that, right? And then I said, okay, Gene, tell me, you're at a cocktail party and this girl comes over to you and she's a trust fund baby and she's whining that she hasn't gotten the last distribution and she needs her mom to do something, and you're about giving and self-reliant. Like you start tensing up as I describe this. Like it's actually a violation of the values. So the problem is, though, most of us know that this person bothers us, or this we just don't know why. And if we understand why, and we understand these are our values, we can make much better decisions about our work and our relationship and the projects we take on.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to talk about the values that you have at a personal level. We've spent a lot of time in this podcast talking about the company values. This is different, but it's just as important that I want you to understand how important it is, and then why you want to do it, and then how to do it through today's conversation with Robert Glazer. Robert is an incredible force inside of business and leadership. He's got incredible books. This latest book is The Compass Within, and a lot of the conversation today really focuses around, why this book and why now, and what does it really mean for you as a leader. If you want to make better decisions, then you definitely want to lean into this book. My name is Gene Hammett. I am a CEO coach. We do executive coaching and leadership development for companies that are in growth mode. And there's a certain amount of chaos that has to be managed. But what's really most important is you as a leader have to evolve to meet the next level challenges of leadership as the company grows. And many leaders, I find, don't know what those challenges are. They put their head down, they show up, they get the work done, and they're good at executing and implementing. But when it comes to leadership, there's always some gaps, or there's some leadership blind spots. Well, that's where I come in. I help you understand your mode of leadership, your principles, and define them in a way that's really clear. But we also help you understand what's getting in your way so that you can move forward at a greater speed and have a greater impact within your culture. Now, that's a lot. What it really means is we help you grow your business and create the kind of culture and leadership model that scales for your business as it continues to grow, and you can run it without you. If you're curious about some of the work that we do, your next step would be to take a free training class that we have. If you're interested in that, go to training.coreelevation.com. Inside that, you will find a free way to sign up, absolutely free. Put in your email address, answer a couple of questions just so we know who you are, and then show up ready to learn about your leadership model and about what's getting in the way of your own success. So here's the interview with the one and only Robert Glazer. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Good to see you, Gene.
You've been on the show before and excited to have you back. We're going to talk about your latest book.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a while, but it's good to be back.
I want to say thank you for your accolades on my book, How to Have Tough Conversations. It's really something we're proud of, and I appreciate you giving us some insight around that. And
well, my son had to have a lot. He made some decisions in the last couple of weeks that had some benefits and some consequences, and he had to let a lot of people know who would be on one side of those decisions. And kept telling him, I was like, "You're gonna get like tough conversations. Don't get tougher by putting them off." Like that has been my experience. They only get harder, and when you have them, you're just gonna feel a lot better. So I was using that advice pretty often the last week.
And it doesn't, you're not going to get to a point where you don't have to have them anymore. Cause I think even as
it just seems easier in the moment not to have it. Right.
It does. All right. We're going to dive into this conversation around your latest book, The Compass Within. Tell us just a little bit about the book so that we get a frame for it.
Yeah, so the book came out of, I wrote this book, Elevate, in 1999, been one of my popular books on capacity building, and it had these four elements of kind of building your capacity. And it was spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional. And spiritual, I talked about really the importance of understanding your personal core values, what you were good at, your strengths. And a lot of people would resonated with that. And they would say to me, I love this. Like, well, how do I do it? And I would be like, well, it's not that easy. And I had sort of figured out a process. And during that time, I was taking leaders at our company through this process, and I had scaled it and I had turned it into a course. And eventually I had released the course and a couple thousand people took it and they're like, this is awesome. This actually really helped me identify my core values and act on it. And so as I continue to get asked that, I was like, well, I got to figure out a way. A lot of people just don't go straight to a course, right? But they want to access this. And so I'd love to turn this into a book, but I have to say, I think a book on core values might not be that interesting. And I don't know how I'd write it to be interesting because somehow it's a kind of thing you have to show, not tell. And I'm a huge fan of Bob Berg and Pat Lencioni, and I really do like the parable fable format. And I had no idea how to write fiction, but I was like, I think this actually is the right format. Why don't I show a person going through these things in life that I call the big three, sort of some consternation around their professional career, their personal relationship, and their community? Because I think those things, decisions, if not core value aligned, will have no chance of working. And the character sort of meets a mentor, is coached to figure out their values, makes these hard decisions, has these tough conversations, and then at the end it sort of shows you the actual framework of, shows you what you saw. So I spent a couple years on it, and I really didn't know if it would work, but it seems like it's working, having some great momentum. Pat Lencioni ended up giving me the cover blurb and helping me with the title. And Bob Berg said, kind of, you have to buy this book. So these are sort of my parable mentors. So I'm excited because I think it makes the topic like fun and accessible to people.
I'm just curious because I've not written the fable. I think it's easier to read. I love Patrick Lencioni's books.
Yeah, super easy to read.
Is it easy to write that? Because I've always been a little bit hesitant to jump into that side.
It's tricky to write. If you haven't written, I guess it sort of is fiction. Character development and keeping track of both the characters and who's who and time orientation, like those were things that got a little confusing and I had to keep going back. And even they're like, you said last year, you said 2 years ago, because part of what you do in these things is you jump forward and you jump back, like sometimes. And I definitely got myself a little lost in that. And I was like, is there software where you track your character and your character's features and when they first appeared, and then you can go find the reference? And so that was one of the challenges.
There's probably AI for that.
Now there is. But look, my daughter sort of challenged me at one point. She's like, you only read nonfiction, you only write nonfiction. Like, and I'm always challenging them. So that was part of it. But it was hard. It was different. But it's like anything, you find the people that know what they're doing, and you find the mentors and you get their advice and you ask them for their honest feedback.
I've got a friend of mine who's been on the show before, and he's written 5, and he's like, it's just easy for him to pull out one now.
It's a fun format, and I think if this book gets the sort of uptick that I'm hoping it will, there's a very logical sort of interesting sequel that could intertwine with it. So I may go back to the well on that.
We are talking about your book, The Compass Within. I love this question, and I don't know if I'm sure you've been asked something similar to it before, but why did you have to write this book? Because we all know that anybody's written a book before, it's not easy, and sometimes we go, we'll never do that again. But
Yeah.
why did you have to write this book?
I had to write this book because A, I needed it at some point in my life. And B, like this is the most powerful unlock I've seen for people. Like when they figure this out, when they write me notes from all around the world, like last week, and they tell me I realized I had a passion for education and educational advocacy, and I went and joined a school board, and I would never have done this without this clarity, and it's the best thing I've done. And I just watched it be the click in leadership and in life. And I think it's always sort of why you, why now? And the now part is, look, where are we today? We're in a super tribal, like not great time in the world where I just keep seeing people switch teams and they're unmoored and making decisions that are illogical, and they can't figure out right and wrong. And I think it's because people are really detached from understanding these kind of unmovable values that they want to live by. And when you don't have the anchoring of values, you fall victim to tribalism, which I think is just more, it's weird to say, but it's more present than ever in it because of its digital form.
So, Robert, what gets in the way of people defining their values?
There's a lot going on, in our life. I think there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of different pulling us in different directions. There's other people's expectations on us. There's other people's circumstances. And that's logical, right? And I think even a lot of people are carrying stuff into their teens or 20s around what people told them they should be or not be or should do. But at some point, you need to strip that back. And at some point, it is those early formative experiences in your life that form the things that are really important to you. And in most cases, I've done this work now with thousands of people. Most people's values are really running towards something that was important to them earlier in their life, or equally, if not more often, running away from something that they really didn't like. And in some way, they might create good out of that. It's not always. I always say the difference between this kind of work and the introspection and therapy is I'm not really encouraging them to go back and let's talk about blame and all this stuff. But I've seen more adult leaders who are in an argument about stuff that is so fundamentally deep to them. And, two people arguing about budget. And I know that one did not feel heard as a kid and the other grew up dirt poor and feels like wasting money is a crime. Right. And this is showing up in their 40-year-old selves in an argument today. And again, so it can drive you or you can drive it with that knowledge. And I don't think most people have unlocked the clarity to grab the steering wheel.
I think of this noise. I've got something that's come up in my work. It's called your inner critic is I'll just be blunt with it. Your inner critic's an asshole.
Yeah.
Because it knows exactly what to say, how to say to stop you from making the decision or having the tough conversation or making that investment or hiring that person or firing that person. You're talking about this from sort of a different angle, but it's really listening, being able to like listen to your own voice.
Yeah, and look, intuitively we know when our values are violated. The problem is this is the analogy for most of us. I give you a tunnel, you're driving a really nice sports car. I turn off the lights on the tunnel. You're probably going to go drift to the right, hit the wall, screech, cut some paint off. It's not going to sound good. You're going to come back to the middle. You're going to overcompensate, drift to the other side. You're going to get out of the tunnel. The car's going to look like shit, pardon my French now. Like, because the walls were your values and you missed the yellow line that said sort of steer clear of crossing our values. When our values are crossed, we know it. We feel like crap, like it doesn't feel good. In fact, the true test of a value when I'm doing this with someone is to imagine the opposite archetype. And I watch people who locked in on it correctly and their face gets so, Gene, like let's just say yours is about generosity and giving and that we determine that, right? And then I said, okay, Gene, tell me, you're at a cocktail party and this girl comes over to you and she's a trust fund baby and she's whining that she hasn't gotten the last distribution and she needs her mom to do something and you're about giving and self-reliant, like you start tensing up as I describe this, like it's actually a violation of the value. So the problem is, though, most of us know that this person bothers us or this thing, we just don't know why. And if we understand why and we understand these are our values, we can make much better decisions about our work and our relationship and the projects we take on. If I know someone's value is in my organization is to include all perspectives, I'm never going to ask that person to quickly go make a unilateral decision and come back to me. Like it's sort of fundamentally against what they stand for. And by the way, if I dug into it, and again, not a therapist, but after running a professional services business for 20 years, I think I can play one on TV. But like the person whose value is include all perspectives in 98% of cases did not feel heard in some way, right? And has that. And so that is very intuitively important to them. And they don't like to use this word triggered, but they get triggered when they see someone being shut down or not included or not listened to them. So that's how they show up in their relationship. That's how they show up as a leader. I was coaching one of our leaders on this, who I was coaching the organization on her values, who was actually going through, I think, a divorce. And when we clarified her core values, she's like, my partner was like the opposite of 2 or 3 of these, like literally the opposite. I was like, it won't work. Like, I'm glad you have that clarity now. I wish I could have given it to you before.
Yeah.
But they don't have to be exact, but they have to align. In fact, this is what people get wrong about relationships. You can have all the activities from your spouse, that are different in the world. Like, I think people think about that as compatibility. Look, you told me the story about your daughter and the prom and the curfew, and I love that a lot. Like, it's the big decisions. Like, my wife and I are very different activities, but we're always aligned on the like big decisions for our kids and our families and those things. If we can't get around those things together, then it's not going to work.
We've been talking about with Robert, listening to your voice. Well, I mentioned this, your inner critic is an asshole. Let me kind of explain that. I have been working with a lot of owners over the last 10 plus years, and I know that there's some doubt that comes in their mind. And it's real easy to say, trust yourself. But when you're listening to a voice inside your head that says you're not good enough, that you should wait, you're not ready, you're not smart enough, whatever it is, maybe it's you're ugly. If you're listening to that inner critic, you're listening to the wrong voice. You want to make sure you're able to tune in to the values like Robert's talking about and let those values become a driving force for you. And you probably want to also be able to bend reality when it comes to these things. Every entrepreneur I know is labeled crazy in the beginning. I've even said this to my wife, who we've got multiple entrepreneurial ventures, and I've said, I don't think that's going to work out. That's the nice way. You're crazy, is the other way that I could have put that. But what ended up happening is she figured it out. She figured out how to make it work, and it took time. But be willing to abandon that inner critic that gets in the way and move forward with optimism and inspiration, because we all do things that are impossible all the time. Back to Robert. I want to switch gears here a little bit because in contrast to the noise, you have this concept of inner compass. What does that mean?
Yeah, the to me, the core values are the inner compass, right? So being able to articulate your core values is the compass that, should I do this? Should I stay in this community? Should I stay in this line of work? Should I be in this relationship? Can I be with this person? Those are that become, most of us have this compass. We just don't know how to read it. And so, I'm offering kind of a system that I think can help people read it in a way, because ultimately, it's about making good decisions. Like that's what the values are. Do I make decisions that are aligned with my values and not aligned with my values? And my Friday Forward last week was a lot about the legal, profession and the firms who chose to kind of fight the sort of illegal executive order or not. And, that those are fundamentally decisions of values. And look, values decisions cost you something. Normally, they're not free. But it's normally, as you said, short-term pain versus long-term pain.
Robert, you're talking about this book is a tool for decision making. Can you go a little bit deeper for those leaders that are got a team that isn't very good at decision making, and how they can leverage the concepts from this book?
Yeah. So look, there are company values, right? And those are things that a company has. But I think each leader, a couple years ago, I spoke at a company and they said, look, here's what we expect of leaders. And they gave kind of a list. And I was like, this is great. Like, this is how you want them to behave, but you can't tell them how you want them to lead. How they are going to lead is very personal to them. And some people, trust is really important to them. And others, it's competence, and others, it's everyone, needs to be heard or otherwise. So when they think about, what am I going to agree to? Where am I going to stick my sort of head in the ground? And that's a lot of the notes I've gotten in the last few weeks. People who quit things or walked away or said, no, this is a red line for me personally. Look, companies do layoffs all the time. We see all these horribly executed layoffs. There's a difference between having to do that and then having to follow the playbook that the company gives you and say, this just feels, they're asking me to be inhumane, and I'm not an inhumane person, and I'm not going to do that. This sort of fundamentally violates my values.
Robert's been talking about decision making. What I know about decision making that I want to highlight for you today is that if you don't have a plan in advance, you're going to get, kind of haphazard results. But if you have a plan for decision making, if you have a rubric, if you have tools that you can call on, it doesn't have to be just one tool like values. There could be other aspects, and you can, get them with your coach, your mentor, or your team can build these tools of how do we make decisions. It helps you to have that in advance before you go into the issue, the challenge. And so it's one thing that you can actually do before you get to the problem is talk about how we make decisions and what's important to us. And it comes back to values as well. So it's kind of full circle, if you will. Back to Robert. Where do people go wrong with their values? And there's a couple of places I've seen it with my clients. One specifically is they'll be all aspirational values,
Yeah.
and it doesn't align with who they are today and what made them successful. Do you see any other kind of where people
Yeah,
go
no,
wrong?
that's a main one. It's aspirational. It's not who they are. Same as company values. Same criteria to apply to company and individual values. They're just discovered in a different way because one is about the collective and one is about you. The other thing is, I just have a test, and it's called Core Validator. That's sort of the system in the book. One word doesn't cut it. Like, I people think integrity is a value. I have at least 6 definitions of integrity, that I've heard. For some people, it's telling the truth. So, like, how do I know if I did good at integrity, last month? So, I have a thing in the book called the sort of core validator, and this is sort of the threshold test. Like, I think, a core value should be a constant, non-negotiable principle. It should be a distinct definition or point of view. 2 to 5 word phrase works best, and it's got to be a sort of able to be used to make a decision. That is sort of the key structure around it. And then when we talk about the validator, like, I break that into 2 parts on how do you know it's the right theme. So can you use it to make a decision, past or present, before you get into the fancy wording of it? And when you imagine the opposite of it, like, does it strike a nerve? So that's what I was saying before. That's how we know I've got the right thing. So, like, let's say it's something around respect, and can I know if I was being respectful or not? Yes, then can I make a decision that says, hey, that was respectful or not respectful? And when I think about someone who's disrespectful, does it drive me crazy? Yes. So then you take that and you say, okay, well, if I don't know whether it's always be respectful or be respectful but authentic or something like that, you'd say, all right, is it a phrase rather than a word? And can I objectively rate myself on it, right? Can I say, like, oh, you know what, I did that, or I didn't do that, or I was actually not good. I felt a little off because I lost my temper and I was a little, disrespectful kind of to someone last month. So the first part is like the theme of it. Am I locked in on the right concept? And then the second part is, can I word this in a way that's helpful, to me? And it's helpful when you can objectively, I can't really, I can, integrity is a hard, like, did I tell the truth? Right? That's a very simple thing to say, like, I did a good job at that, or I'm doing that, or I'm not doing that. Like, it's much more clear.
One more really quick question here, and I got a final wrap up. How many values should someone have? I know that you can have a couple maybe, or you can have 12. Where do you answer that question? How many is the right number?
Similar to a company, like the rule of 3 applies really well, as you know, to things like goals and tasks and otherwise. I actually think 3 to 5 are ideal so that you remember them. If you don't remember them, it's not super helpful, right? If you need a mnemonic or otherwise. So look, my core values are to find a better way and share it, self-reliance, respectful authenticity, long-term orientation, and health and vitality. Like, if I need to think about a decision, like, I don't need to pull up an index card and look for them. I remember going to some hotel years ago, and they were talking about their core values and all their service members, and they had a card and they pulled them out, and there were 11 of them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's just no way that people are behaving on these. So I think 3 to 4, so you can remember them. They're really well worded. You come to a decision. What I encourage people to do, and we'll talk about the 6 questions at the end to get people started down the process who want to do it. But I encourage you, when you kind of have your draft ones, to put them, like, on your desk and leave them there for 3 or 4 weeks. And the next time you were like, God, I felt like in flow and that felt really good and I was enjoying that, like, take a look down. You're like, oh, I was doing that or otherwise. Or you have a really difficult conversation. You're like, that felt horrible. And take a look down and see if, like, that covered it and make some tweak, because that's how you know you're kind of locked in.
One last thing, Robert. If someone wanted to pick up the book, where's the best place to get it, and why should they do it now versus waiting?
Yeah, so books are wherever books are sold. If you go onto the robertglazer.com site and you go to the Compass page, if you pre-order the book, the hardcover, I think it's like $17. The companion course, that's $100. You'll get it for free. So that's going to run through launch week. And a lot of people, after they read it, they're like, oh, I want to do this work, but I could use some help with it. And as much I'd like to coach 100,000 people, like that's really hard. So I put that all into an hour thing that they can watch and do it. So I'm trying to make this a no-brainer. My goal is to help 1 million people figure out their core values. I'm just giving this away to people who buy the book. So that's the best reason to run out and get it early.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here, Robert.
Thanks. And just one last thing, if you want to get started on the process, you don't even want to buy the book or whatever, just go to robertglazer.com/6. And that's the 6 questions that you should start thinking about that'll kind of lead you down to the path to your core values.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Gene.
Wow, what a great interview. I love talking about values. I really believe that when you understand your values, what really is in your heart and soul, your compass, if you will, you have a better way and a tool set to answer questions in your life, choose a path, make a decision. It really is a powerful force, and most people don't realize how important it is. You can't just show up to work, and you've got to have some guardrails, if you will, and these values are very important to that. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.